During a recent interview with Democracy Now!, progressive journalist, debate powerhouse, and friend of the show, Mehdi Hasan, publicly torched many of Donald Trump's wildly dangerous cabinet nominees and MAGA Republicans for their selective outrage about presidential ethics in a takedown you absolutely have to see. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. All right, friends, we have several clips to look at in this video from a conversation earlier today, as a matter of fact, that Mehdi Hasan had with Democracy Now! And this is in context of new developments about former Fox News host and future Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth that we'll probably cover specifically in its own video. Kash Patel, the fascistic new potential director of the FBI nominated by Donald Trump, and in the aftermath of President Biden's decision to pardon his only living son, Hunter. So that's the context for all of this. And we're going to hear what Mehdi has to say because it's a pretty brutal, 100% fully commensurate with Mehdi's style takedown of these wildly unhinged cabinet nominees.
And you played that clip from the War Room, from the Steve Bannon show. I think that's from December 2023. He put us on notice, he says in that clip. We're putting you on notice. Well, we're on notice. In fact, I've been warning about Kash Patel since 2022 when I was at MSNBC and I predicted that Trump would make him FBI director and he would go after the media. He's making it very clear. He wants to prosecute journalists. In another time and era, Amy, those words would be chilling. Those words would disqualify him from the running. But of course, Republican senators mostly will fall in line. We'll see if the Murkowskis and the Susan Collinses and Mitch McConnell, whether they'll push back in the way they did on Matt Gaetz. He's a deeply dangerous nominee. I would argue that clip you played from the Bannon War Room show makes him perhaps the most dangerous nominee so far because he's open about the fact that he wants to use the power of the state to crush Donald Trump's opponents. He's a sycophant. He's a bag carrier. He literally wrote a children's book about King Donald Trump. That's how sycophantic he is. And I would say to some of the progressives maybe watching your show this morning, Amy Goodman, who say, well, you know what? The FBI does need reform. We on the left don't like the FBI. We think Kash Patel should go break it up. Well, look, you could not like the FBI for good reason. But the only reason Kash Patel and the Republicans don't like the FBI is because the FBI investigated Donald Trump over ties to Russia and because the FBI went to Mar-a-Lago and searched his home for stolen classified documents, which he was.
So again, making a really compelling case here for how dangerous Kash Patel is. We talked about him in multiple previous videos. This is a man who is wildly unmoored from reality, unmoored from any sort of principle. And the clip that they're talking about from Steve Bannon's War Room podcast was the viral clip that we've talked about in multiple videos about Kash Patel publicly saying that he wants to prosecute members of the media and people who spread the lie that President Biden won the 2020 election, a lie that was in fact the truth, not a lie at all. And it leads one to believe, well, who the hell is Kash Patel talking about? It sounds like he just wants to cast a wide net and target anybody that he doesn't like, anybody that he paints as some sort of critic of Donald Trump. And so I agree that of all the people that have been nominated by Donald Trump to cabinet positions, most of them are unqualified. Now, Marco Rubio is still not my preferred choice. I would not want him to be a Secretary of State, but he's not unqualified. He's very qualified for that role. It's just personal philosophy difference in the fact that he's a sycophant. But Hegseth and Tulsi Gabbard and RFK Jr., I mean, all these people are incredibly dangerous, but I would argue that Kash Patel is the one that is most overtly dangerous. So I totally agree with Mehdi there for the reasons that he outlined. But since the topic turned and since he mentioned Pete Hegseth, and again, we're probably going to do a separate video about the new revelations surrounding Pete Hegseth, this is what Mehdi Hasan had to say about Hegseth and the rest of the parade of horribles coming from Donald Trump's nominations.
Hasan.
So, Amy, if you'd asked me this a few weeks ago, I'd have said Hegseth is the worst pick of all. You can't get worse than Hegseth. And then we got Tulsi Gabbard, and I said you can't get worse than Gabbard. And then we got RFK Jr., and I said you can't get worse than RFK Jr. And now we've got Kash Patel, and I'm telling you, can't get worse than Kash Patel. Donald Trump says, hold my beer every time and keeps producing these nominees. And look, while we're focused on Patel, we've got more reporting on Hegseth. I mean, it's astonishing. It's almost beyond belief. If you were writing a TV show about the Trump years, if it was a Netflix show called The Trump Years, you would say these storylines are just too unrealistic. If you were sitting in the writer's room and you said, you know what, let's have a scene where it turns out that Hegseth, the great Christian nationalist, tried to get on stage with strippers. Let's have his mother write him a letter saying, I disown you because of all, your misogyny. You would say, oh, come on, that's a little unrealistic. Those are kind of beyond parody characters. No, it's real life. This is the Trump administration. These are the people he's appointing. And I think it's interesting, by the way, the Islamophobia is very worrying on Hegseth's part, because there was this strain of thinking, even on some parts of the left, that, well, Trump won't be as militaristic and belligerent as the Democrats. Not true. He's putting in a guy at Defense Department who has crusader tattoos on his body, who said outrageous things about killing Muslims, supported the Iraq war. He's going to be in charge of the Pentagon. There's no way this is going to be a quote unquote anti-war presidency if Hegseth's at the Pentagon and Marco Rubio's at the State Department. By the way, can you imagine, Amy, if Biden or Obama had a nominee who had been accused of screaming drunkenly, kill all Jews, it'd be the end of the world. But of course, with Muslims, no one cares. So this will be a minor.
Again, a great point made by Mehdi Hasan there about the asymmetry applied to Muslims and Arab Americans in this country and elsewhere compared to others as well. I mean, we'll get into the specifics of the comments made about Pete Hegseth. Now, stuff that we have talked about in the past include that letter that was it was an email from Pete Hegseth's mother to him in 2018 during the midst of one of Hegseth's divorce, and it was brutal, in which Hegseth's own mother, she didn't disown him technically, but she excoriated him in multiple paragraphs. She called him an abuser of women and called him out, and that email's contents were found by the New York Times, and they were published. And again, pretty humiliating to be called out by your own mother in this particularly specific and particularly egregious way. It's an ever-increasing list of scandals that surround Pete Hegseth, and one of the many reasons that he's unqualified for the role. The fact of the matter is, even experientially, I mean, this is a guy, yes, he is a decorated war veteran, but in terms of administrative experience, in terms of command experience, he's never had a leadership role in the United States military. And so there's just simply no reason to believe that between the ethical scandals and allegations surrounding him, he's been credibly accused of sexual misconduct, that he is the person for whom you should die on this hill to make Secretary of Defense. Of course, as I pointed out in previous videos, they doubled down on Brett Kavanaugh to be Supreme Court Justice, despite credible allegations made against him, and despite the fact that there were hundreds, perhaps thousands, perhaps tens of thousands of qualified conservative legal scholars or judges across the country that you could have substituted for Kavanaugh. So I just have no faith that MAGA Republicans will turn tail 6 years later for somebody like Hegseth. I think they'll double down. And I mentioned at the beginning of this that, part of the interview discussed President Biden's nomination. Why did I say nomination? I'm sorry, pardon of Hunter Biden, his only living son, for the various felonies that he committed in an attempt, according to President Biden, to protect Hunter Biden from politically charged prosecutions in the future. And then, of course, if you consider Kash Patel as the FBI director, kind of makes sense that Biden might do that, even though I believe it was technically an abuse of presidential power that I'm not particularly comfortable with, even though I understand it. Now, Mehdi Hasan feels similarly, and this is what he had to say, and this is where he torches MAGA Republicans for their hypocrisy and double standards when it comes to presidential ethics.
It is a sweeping pardon, as you just mentioned, and you played the clips. I think we can hold multiple thoughts in our head at one time on Hunter Biden. Number one, did Joe Biden lie when he said he wouldn't pardon Hunter Biden? Clearly he did. Is he a hypocrite for saying no one is above the law and then putting his son above the law? Yes. Should the presidency be used to protect family members? No. I think we can all agree on those points. Having said that, the kind of outrage from Republicans and some in the media is a little bit kind of ridiculous. We all know that Hunter Biden was targeted. The president is right when he says that they went after his son because he was his son. Anyone called Hunter Smith wouldn't have been prosecuted in the same way for the tax evasion and the gun form that many people get wrong or provide incorrect information on. And as for the Republicans kind of crying foul right now, you have Kash Patel. I know we're going to talk about Kash Patel, who is a Trump toady who's about to be appointed FBI director if he can get through the Senate. He's on record saying he's going to go after the Bidens. The Republicans have made very clear they plan to carry on going after the Biden family. So is it understandable that Joe Biden is trying to protect his son from future investigations? It is understandable. That doesn't make it right. But come on, as you mentioned as well a moment ago, Amy, Charles Kushner is about to become ambassador to France. He is the father-in-law of Ivanka Trump, who Trump pardoned in December 2020. So, let's just get rid of the presidential pardon power, which would require a constitutional amendment. I think that's the source of all the corruption.
And of course,
again, as I mentioned in a previous video discussing the particular pardon, I won't relitigate it. I do think there need to be, at the bare minimum, constraints on the presidential pardon power. This idea that it's the sweeping, unambiguous, unconstrained power. I mean, my God, there's a very good chance that Donald Trump will attempt to pardon himself on the notion that the Constitution doesn't explicitly prohibit presidents from using the pardon power against themselves. There's this legal standard, about how a man cannot be the judge in his own trial, which, would spit in the face of this notion that, somebody cannot be a criminal and also use their powers to pardon themselves. But again, it's not explicitly written anywhere in the Constitution that you can't do that. And of course, that's when conservative legal scholars will selectively defer to originalism and textualism. Well, of course, Trump can do this. It's not written that he can. Regardless, there do need to be reforms, in my opinion, to the pardon power. I totally agree. It's a power that's subject to abuse. But again, Mehdi does it as only Mehdi can, just a debater par excellence, where he makes the case that even though he agrees that this is an abuse of presidential power, there is really no validity and legitimacy to MAGA Republican pearl clutching on the matter, because Donald Trump has abused the pardon power far more egregiously and corruptly than President Biden ever has, and for far less reason. So again, classic Mehdi Hasan. He's so good at what he does. I'm looking forward to interviewing him again, I believe, in January. So stick around, definitely check that out. And in the meantime, let me know what you think in the comments.